everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jill and today I'm going to be doing my mid-year wrap-up, or basically all the books that I have read so far this year. So let's just get into it. Since I haven't made any wrap-up videos this year, I thought this would be a great time just to talk very briefly about all the books that I've read through June. I have about 35 books to go through, and so I'm not going to be going very in-depth with my little wrap-up portion for each book. I'm mostly just going to be giving my star rating and maybe a few thoughts, but I won't be like summarizing the book or anything like that. Just to keep this video as short as possible because I do have the tendency to just like start rambling off. Anyway, so without further ado, let's just start with the book that I read in January. So as I've talked about in like my I'm Back video and everything like that, I've had a trouble with reading the past 2 years. I really haven't been wanting to read anything, and so I only read one book in January, or like January to February, and it probably wasn't the best choice for a book just because it is kind of more of a slow book, but I decided to pick up The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Like I said, this is a very slow burn kind of book, and it's very whimsical, it's very magical, it's very like rich and deep, and so it probably wasn't what I should have been reading to try to get me out of a slump, just because like it took me so long to read. So I ended up giving this 3 stars, and I feel like I totally understand. I just think that I personally just wasn't really in the mood for it, and I wasn't really invested in the plot. Like, it was very pretty writing. Like, anyone who talks about this book talks about how pretty the writing is. It's about this like magical circus, and it's really like weird and strange, but the writing is great. So totally understand why people like it. Wasn't totally my cup of tea. The next book I read I had a little bit more luck with, and that was The Winter's Curse by Rutkoski. I've talked about this series a little bit in my past videos. Love these covers so much. Like, I think they are so gorgeous. Anyway, so I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it because like when I wasn't reading, I thought that I wouldn't want to read YA again, but this is very clearly like a YA fantasy book. I liked the characters, I liked the plot, I liked the little romance that was brewing. I just thought that it was really quick and easy and nice, and yeah, it just made me want to keep reading, so this was a pretty big success for me. After those 2 books, the ball started rolling a little bit more because now we're into March, when I was on spring break and when quarantine all happened and I wasn't allowed to return to college, so I really started reading more. The first book that I read was Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is like a superhero type of book. I heard lots of people saying that it was so good, so I decided to pick it up even though it's like a behemoth, and this is one of the last books that I bought before I stopped reading, so I was just like, you know what, it's time. And I love Marissa Meyer as an author, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I thought that I went through it really quickly despite it being over 500 pages, which was like so cool to me because again, haven't been reading, so to be able to like really quickly go through like a 500-page book felt like a success to me. So yeah, it's all about these superheroes who have all these powers, and there's like the good guys and the bad guys, but then those lines start to blur, so I just thought it was really fun, and I like where the story is going, so I'll hopefully read the next one at some point. Then I read some Colleen Hoover books, and I know there's lots of controversy surrounding Colleen Hoover and her books, which is totally valid, and some of them are better than others. I've just found that I'm able to really fly through her books, and I really enjoy reading them personally. I know that is not a universal opinion, and that is totally fine. Yeah, so I picked up both of these. The first one that I picked up was Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is kind of her thriller book, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I know this is kind of a polarizing book. Some people like it, some people like despise it, but I personally thought that it was pretty cool, and lots of people hate the ending. I personally really liked the ending just because it really made me think. I don't read thriller like ever, and so as far as like whether it's a good thriller book, I don't really have any like say in that, but I personally was entertained, and it really like messed with my mind and stuff. So yeah, this is really unlike Colleen Hoover's other books, like I said, in that it's a thriller and that it's like creepy and weird, and there's some like funny stuff going on with the couple. I was pretty entertained. And the second book that I read by her was Without Merit. Now this I had originally rated like a 3.5 stars, but I have since decided that I'm going to lower it to like a 2 star because I didn't notice it like while I was reading, but when I was looking at the reviews, lots of them talked about how the portrayal of suicide in this book is very like dangerous and damaging, and the more I think about it, the more I think, yeah, you know, that's like really true. Like the way that suicide is handled in this book is like, it's not really the best and it's not the healthiest. The more I think about it, I'm like, why did I rate that so high? Because there's some like weird like borderline incest stuff going on in this book, and you know what, yeah, it's definitely not Colleen Hoover's best work. Next up I have Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin, and this was the first audiobook that I listened via Scribd, and I am not, this isn't sponsored at all, I just really like them. I really loved this book. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. Since I finished the book and gave it 5 stars, I have since watched some reviews that talked about the problematic elements in this book, which I did not notice when I was reading. The biggest one is that the way that Shelby Mahurin describes people of color is very different than how she describes like the white characters, as in the white characters get like paragraphs of description and then the people of color get like a sentence at most. So that's kind of shitty. So I really hope that that is improved upon in the next book, because I did really like this story and I liked the magic system. I thought that it was really interesting. Like, magic always takes something. Like, so if the main character wants to open a lock, one of her fingers has to break, and so it's like this give and take kind of system, and I don't know, I just thought that was really interesting. And there's also blood magic, which is going to be center of the next book. I will be reading the sequel if I get it much more critically than I read the first one, now that I know the problematic elements. Anyway, so I still gave it 5 stars. I still really enjoyed it, but it does have some issues with it. Next up, I listened to one of my favorite books of the whole year, and that is the Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. This was such a pleasant surprise. This was like my first like traditional adult romance book, and I was just so pleasantly surprised. It was so wonderful. This is an own voices novel. Helen Hoang is both Vietnamese and she also is autistic, and so through all of her books there are Vietnamese characters and also autistic characters, which I really liked that representation. And I've seen people comment on my videos and also just looking at reviews that the representation, especially for autism, is very accurate, so that is great. I was mostly surprised in this book because I picked it up knowing like absolutely nothing. Like, I didn't know that it featured autistic characters or Vietnamese characters. I just like picked it up on a whim because I had seen like people talking about it and I've seen the cover around. But I was really surprised because it turned out the male lead was Vietnamese, and my boyfriend is Vietnamese, and so to see like that culture that I've sort of experienced from dating him incorporated into the book, it was just cool to see that culture, and I would tell him about it. He thought that that was cool too. So yeah, I was just very surprised, and it was such a good story, and I loved the romance, and it was just, I loved it. Oh, and I ended up giving it a 4.75 stars. I think not quite a 5-star, but very close. Next, I read a book for my Gothic literature class, and that was Dracula by Bram Stoker. I had never read this book before. I had never really been interested, or no, that's a lie. I have been interested in this book, but like as far as vampires aren't really my thing. But this book, I ended up giving 4 stars. I also rate my classics like differently than my normal books. I rate them based on like my personal enjoyment reading them and also our class discussions on them. So not necessarily like whether they're problematic, because of course this is problematic. It's sexist as hell. I ended up like enjoying the story for the most part. The beginning was wonderful in my opinion. The second half was boring. It was very repetitive, but the first half at least was very fun and I really liked it. I had a really good time with it and I really liked our class discussions on it. Then I read, I don't want to talk about this book. Wintersong by S Jae Jones. I was so excited to read this book because one of my best friends loves it, and I'm going to try to keep this as short and sweet as possible because I probably could do a whole rant review on this book because it is so problematic in its portrayals of sex and in its portrayals of consent. Like, if you couldn't tell, I gave this 1 star because I could not get into it. Besides like the very annoying and boring characters, problematic elements were just, oh my god. So like I said, I'll probably make a video at some point like talking about like my least favorite books of the year, like going more in depth. But the thing that bothered me the most about this book, these are very minor spoilers and I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible. But if you have like no interest in knowing any spoilers like at all, even if they're the tiniest ones, then mute it or skip until I put this book down. Anyway, so basically the main girl, Lisa, I think is her name, I don't even care, she is so obsessed with sex. She like puts sex on such a high pedestal that she thinks like the only way that she'll be worth like anything to this guy is if he wants to have sex with her. And when the guy ends up saying that he doesn't want to have sex like at that moment, that he doesn't think that it's a good idea right now, he like throws herself on him. Like, she is so persistent and like does not want to stop even though he's telling her to stop. And then like she throws an actual temper tantrum because the guy does not want to have sex with her. Like an actual, like, I'm not saying she got mad, I'm saying she went back to her room and absolutely destroyed her entire room, ripped off her clothes, broke all of her furniture, all because this guy said that he didn't want to have sex with her under the circumstances that were happening. And like, she was throwing herself onto this guy, and I really thought that she wasn't going to take no for an answer, if you know what I mean, and it was just very uncomfortable, and it was borderline rape. It's just very bad portrayals of sex and consent, and like I said, there are like way more examples and problems that I had with this book. I don't want to talk too long about it because it doesn't deserve that. Anyway, so yeah, I really didn't like this book. I'm just gonna stop talking about it. This was a big mess, and I hated this book. Alright, let's start picking up the pace. Next, I read Slander by Colleen Hoover. I gave this a 3 stars. I think this was fun. I could very much tell that this was Colleen Hoover's like first book. Like, it was kind of cringy and very like tropey, and you know, it wasn't the best, but I did have a fun time and I read it in like a day, so like, you know, it was okay, but yeah, nothing special at all. Next, I have my first Cristina Lauren book, which I'm so excited about, and that is Love and Other Words. I ended up giving this a 4.5 star, and I was so conflicted when I was rating this book because I thought like almost the entirety that I was listening to this on audiobook that it was going to be one of my favorite books of like all time ever. Like, that's how great it was. It was so bookish and sweet, and I loved the romance. It's told in like this then versus now, when the main couple or kids, and then when they're adults, and then like stuff happens in between when they were kids and adults that like separated them. The thing that really disappointed me about this book and ended up it's not one of my favorite books of all time because the twist kind of at the end did not sit right with me, and that is probably just a personal thing, and I thought that it was like dealt with like way too like casually. Yeah, you know, I don't know. I feel like it was just like the thing that happened, I can't say it because like the whole point of the book is like finding out what this thing, like what happened. Again, it made me so upset because I was so invested in this book. The ending just let me down. So yeah, it was still really great. I think this is my favorite Cristina Lauren book, and I've read a couple, but yeah. So 4.5 stars. It was pretty good, but I wish the twist was different. Next, I have another book that I read for my Gothic Lit class, and that is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. I also really enjoyed this book. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Again, I rate classics on how much I enjoyed them and our class discussions, but I thought the topics that this dealt with like powerful men and the dangers of science and stuff like that was very interesting, and you know, I enjoyed it. Oh, I totally like this isn't in my Goodreads, and so I think I might have 36 after this. I don't know why it's not in my Goodreads. I think because I didn't rate it or something like that, but also for that Gothic Lit class, the last book that we read was The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I hated this book. This book is very racist, and there's lots of debate about whether it's intentionally racist or whether it's trying to make a point about racism, or whether Joseph Conrad was racist or whether he was trying to combat racism and all that stuff. But I like tried to write my class discussions without having like actually read the text. Like, I was just skimming it and being like, this is so boring, and like I don't care at all about what's happening in the story. So if I had to rate it, probably 1 star or like no rating, because I didn't even finish it because it was that bad. Anyway, so I also read this. Next, I read The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker, which I gave a 4.5 stars to. I was not expecting to like this book. It takes place in rural Alaska, and like that's not really my thing, but I really loved the family dynamics in this book, and I thought that it was really sweet, and the romance was really good, and yeah, I ended up falling in love with this cute little rural town, and this is definitely a book that's going to make you cry, so if you do pick it up, just know that it is very emotional in like a lot of different ways. Next up, I have The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. I do have it, but I don't really want to get it out. Anyway, so I give this book a 2 stars. I talked about this in my mid-year book freakout tag as the most disappointing book, just because lots of people that I trusted and that I was subscribed to loved this book, and I just didn't like it very much, and I wasn't invested in the story. It's a YA fantasy book. Yeah, so there's not much else for me to say because I don't really remember what it was about because it was kind of forgettable for me. It felt just like a worse version of Six of Crows to me, so. Next, I read another totally like unexpected surprise, and that was Love Boat Taipei by Abigail Hing Wen. And this is an Own Voices novel that follows a Taiwanese American girl. Parents send her to Taiwan to kind of get like in touch with her culture before she goes to college. Such a pleasant surprise. I am definitely not like a drama-filled YA contemporary fan. Like, I normally don't like books that have a bunch of like unnecessary angst and drama within them, but I was living for this book. Like, I would tell my mom and my boyfriend like daily updates about like all the shit that went down in this book, and it was so fun. This is probably like the most fun I've had reading a book in a while, like just because there was so much drama, and there's like a love triangle in it. Like nowadays, like if there's a love triangle, I'm just like, oh my god, Not this again. This one I was actually invested in and I never knew which way the love triangle was going to go. Like normally with love triangles there's like an obvious winner and an obvious loser and it's just like painful. But this one like I never really knew and I liked both of the main characters. So yeah, this book was so entertaining while also having its kind of serious moments in it where it talks about depression and suicidal thoughts. Yeah, I was just totally into this book. Like it was so much fun. Alright, my battery died, which tells me that I've been talking too long. But the next book that I have is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. This was absolutely enthralling. This book is very violent and very brutal, and it was like, sometimes it was hard to get through because the beginning is very dense and I was like hella confused. About a girl named Mia and she goes to an assassin school to become like best tier of assassin so that she can go and kill the people who killed her father. Yeah, I just really loved Mia and she is definitely like a morally gray character. Like the narrator tells you over and over again how she's not a good person and that you shouldn't be rooting for her, and like she does some actions that aren't very great. And so I really like the in-depth look of morally gray characters, and yeah, this book was really fascinating to me and the world is like horrible. It was just something about it that really like has stuck with me for a while. So yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I listened to another Cristina Lauren book, and that was my favorite, Half Night Stand, and this book I gave like a 2 stars. This was a very meh book. I didn't like any of the side characters, so like the main female lead, I wouldn't want to date her, so like it was kind of hard to root for the couple just because the main girl is so toxic and just isn't the best for like anyone involved, and like there's reasons for that. It was just kind of hard to get through the book when like she was kind of awful. So yeah, this one just wasn't very amazing to me. Next, I read Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I was so excited to read this book because I had seen it everywhere. It has this gorgeous pink cover, and my new favorite color is this shade of pink. I love pink now, and so this book just seemed right up my alley and it was so wonderful. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved the humor in this book. It was downright hilarious, and the male romance in this book was the sweetest. I also liked taking a break from our current political hellscape. There was like a nice family living in the White House. If you didn't know, this follows the son of the first female president of the United States and also the Prince of England. Really fun to me to break from the reality and just really enjoy these two guys together. I still just love this pink color, like, ugh. So good. Next up, I read The Bride Test by Helen Hoang. This is the companion novel / sequel kind of thing to The Kiss Quotient. So I gave this one initially 4 stars, but it's probably more of like 3.5 just based on my own personal enjoyment. This one is kind of a story that you have to get behind because when you first read the summary, it's kind of odd because it's an arranged marriage. Like the main male character's mom goes to Vietnam and like picks this girl like kind of off the street to come back to America and marry her son because her son, who is autistic, like can't seem to get a girlfriend. And so yeah, so they kind of come together that way, and they both don't really want to be there but are kind of only entertaining the idea to appease others in their lives, and so you kind of had to like get behind that idea. The romance did end up being very sweet. I ended up giving it a 3.5 because there was a lot of miscommunication that was happening in this book that I think could have easily been resolved. One that really rubbed me the wrong way. This is very like basic spoilers, but again, if you don't want to know any spoilers for this book, wait until this picture disappears. But one thing that happens is again that the male character is autistic, and so sometimes he hurts the feelings of the main girl because she doesn't know what's going on. And so Kai, who is the main male lead, he ends up telling Esme, who is the female lead, that he has autism to try to explain his actions. But Esme does not speak English, and so she has no idea what autism means. And so Kai thinks that she knows, but she like still doesn't have any idea, so they continue to kind of hurt each other and misunderstand each other. And so I just feel like that could have been more quickly resolved because that's not really resolved until like the very end, so it's kind of hard to get behind the relationship when there was like this constant like miscommunication happening. But again, I've heard that the rep is great in her books, and so overall I did like the book, but there were just some small problems I had with it. Next, I listened to another oof, and that was How to Hack a Heartbreak by Kristen Rockaway, I think is her name. I gave this book 1 star. Listen, I like the concept of this book. Like, I'm not opposed to like feminist literature, but this book just went like way too far in the other direction. It was way too preachy for me, and the girl was just so unlikable. It's all about how women are abused in the workplace, which is totally a valid thing, and about how this girl ends up creating a dating app where women can go on and rate the guys that they have met through this other dating site and like say whether they are horrible guys or whether they ghosted them or something, dick pics or whatever. It's kind of about the tension that that causes, and again about how horrible every single living breathing man is to the main girl in this book. And it's supposed to be a romance. It's supposed to be an adult romance. Her boyfriend, or if the male love interest like even breathed in the wrong direction, the main girl would just assume that he was this horrible human being, and she was just like really terrible to the guy for absolutely no reason. Like I said, I totally understand what the author was going for. It was just way too much. I just don't really enjoy reading books to where every single guy is the scum of the earth. Yeah, if you enjoy books that are very, very, very feminist like that, you might enjoy this book, but it was just not for me. Next, I read Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, and I was so excited for this book because it was about magical libraries, and it's a standalone fantasy, and I've heard so many people saying that it was great. I ended up giving this a 3.5 star. It was another kind of disappointment in the YA fantasy category for me. It wasn't bad by any means, it was just kind of there. I did enjoy the bookish kind of library elements to it, and this is where like the books are like alive and they can do stuff, and the books are like ranked based on like how dangerous they are, and they can actually like become monsters and kill you. So that was really cool, but as far as like I wasn't really connected to the romance or the characters like individually. I just kind of liked the atmosphere. So yeah, that's why I gave it a 3.5. Next up was a very exciting book. I decided that I was going to reread The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare, so I picked up Clockwork Angel, and this was so much fun. I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I was really nervous rereading this series because I wasn't sure whether I was going to like it as much as I did the first time, but it has been like 8 years since I've read these books. I wanted to get ready for Chain of Gold too, and so I decided that I was going to reread these books, and this was so much fun. I was so pleasantly surprised and just felt like I was coming home. Like it warmed my heart so much, and it was so charming, and it was great being back in this world. Next up, I read The Winter's Crime by Marie Rutkoski. This is the second book in the Winter's trilogy. Like I talked about the first one, this one was pretty good. I ended up giving a 3.5. I felt that this was more filler than like actual plot, but I think that the filler in this book, or the lead up in this book, is going to really pay off in the last book, because the ending of this book, like, stuff happens. So this one was pretty good. It was fun. I really do like this series, and I'm excited to see where it ends. Next, I read Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. Don't let this cover fool you. This book is very smutty, very steamy, and I really ended up enjoying it. This was very fun. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It doesn't have like a ton of substance to it, but it was pretty fun. Next, I read Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. This used to be my favorite book in the series, but I think Clockwork Angel is now my favorite book in the series. And I used to love this book because I was a hardcore, like, I'm going to die on this hill Jem stan. Like, I did not like Will when I read it the first time, so I was just totally team Jem, but now I am equally parts Will and Jem after my reread. This book, like, wasn't my favorite anymore. It was, like I said, Clockwork Angel, but it was still so much fun continuing on with this series. Next is a book that I have talked about so much on my channel so far, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. In my mid-year book freakout tag, I talked about how this was my favorite book that I've read so far this year, and it definitely is in the running for that. It was just such an unexpected surprise, and it was so charming, so wonderful. Evelyn feels so real to me. It was flawless. And I finally rounded out the Infernal Devices trilogy by reading Clockwork Princess. This is actually probably my least favorite in the trilogy, so I ended up giving it another 4 stars. It was still pretty good, and the epilogue will always be so close to my heart. I mean, it was just like kind of sad, and so it's kind of a bummer to read. I finally finished that trilogy, so hopefully I'll be getting the Chain of Gold soon. Then I listened to Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, and this I gave a 3 stars in the end because I loved the beginning. It is so quirky, it is so funny, it is so, like, adorable. If you like banter, you'll probably really like this book because the banter was top-notch. Then, like, kind of the conflict that happens towards the middle of the book really made me upset and made me not like it, and so I didn't like the second half as much, so I ended up giving it a 3 stars. So this book features a plus-size black woman who also deals with chronic pain. So that's pretty cool, and it was really unique compared to some of the other books that I was reading. Oh, and it also takes place in England, and if you listen to the audiobook, the British accents are They're hilarious. Yeah, 3 stars, but definitely pick it up if you're interested because it's a great story. Then I read You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, and this I gave a 4.25 out of 5 stars. This book was so fun. It was so great. I feel like I've been saying fun like every single book. I'm so sorry. This was like the cutest book that I've read in such a long time. So pleasantly surprised. Like I wanted to stand up and cheer for our main character, Liz Lighty. She runs for prom queen for the first time as like the first black girl in her school to like run for prom queen. It was just such a breath of fresh air because it was just so joyful. Next I read Slay by Brittany Morris. This book was the coolest. I've been having to sneeze for like the past 20 minutes. It's so cool. It's about this black girl who teams up with her friend across the world, and they end up creating this VR game based on black culture, and she also deals with like racist people along the way, and I did not expect to like it, but I was totally engrossed, and like I said like 10,000 times, it is the coolest. Next up, I ended up reading Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This book kind of took a while to click with me, and the more I'm thinking about lowering my rating from like a 4 to like a 3 stars, just because no big emotions have really stuck with me after reading this book. It is very kind of slow going. It's told in this kind of then now kind of format that like keeps the mystery alive almost through the whole book, but for me it just was kind of confusing and didn't make a lot of sense. It has to do with secret societies of Yale, which is a cool concept that I had never read about before. But yeah, it's probably more of a 3-star book, but I'll definitely be reading the next one. Next, I read an adorable book, and that was Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Cristina Lauren. This cover is absolutely gorgeous. Like, I love it so much. Just like a quick note, I tried listening to the audiobook of this first, and the audiobook is horrible. The way that the main guy does the voice of the female character was not it, okay? So if you're going to read this book, probably try to get the physical copy or read it on ebook, and try to avoid the audiobook because I just could not. I felt like nails on a chalkboard to me. I could not listen to it. But anyway, so this book was really hilarious and cute, and I ended up getting it a 4 out of 5 stars. 2 things that kept me from giving it a full 5-star was, first thing is the ending, and that seems to be a main criticism of this book, is that the ending is really random, and for me, it did not make logical sense. And the second thing is definitely a me thing. Like, I gotta say, this is me. This isn't this book, this is me. And some people are gonna think I'm crazy. So if you didn't know, I love the K-pop group BTS. Old bias favorite person on the earth is Park Jimin, and Josh's Korean name is Jimin. And so he is called that a lot by the main character as kind of like a nickname type of thing. And I was cringing every single time they said his name was Jimin. I just could not take it. I know for some people that might be a plus and makes you want to read the book, but I personally just could not do it. I don't know why. It was just so cringy. It was really cute, and the banter between the 2 main characters were just golden, but I had a few problems with it. Alright, we get into the end, people. If you have continued to watch through this point, you are my hero. But the next book that I read was With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, and this book was wonderful. I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I listened to the audiobook, and I would highly recommend all of Elizabeth Acevedo's books on audio because she narrates them herself, and they're just so wonderful, and you can really get the feelings behind this book. So I really like this story. This also deals with a single mom, which I have never, I think, read about in YA specifically, because the main girl in this book, she ends up getting pregnant when she's 14, and so it deals a lot with what it means to be a teen mom and like how people look at you and kind of the sexism that's kind of that, as in like the guy, right, who got the girl pregnant isn't really held accountable, and like he's kind of like patted on the back, but then the girl is kind of slut shamed and like thought less of because she has a baby when she's a teenager, and so I just really love that dynamic. Also, the romance was, I really enjoyed this book, and it's definitely one of my favorites of the year. Alright, so the next book that I read was another 1-star or 1.5 stars, and that was Only Mostly Devastated by Sophie Gonzalez. This book just did not sit well with me, and that might just be a me thing because I can't speak to the representation because I'm not closeted and or out gay male. I can't really like say definitively that my criticisms are correct, but this book just rubbed me the wrong way because I felt like there was a lot of shame put on the closeted character. Yeah, the out character is named Ollie and the closeted character is named Will, and so Ollie really gives Will like a bad time emotionally, and on the same time Will gives Ollie a bad time, and so it's just kind of like weirdly toxic in just my opinion, and it was kind of hard to read from, and also all the side characters I didn't care about at all. And I feel like all of the problems between the main couple could have been fixed if they just sat down and talked about what they wanted out of the relationship, because I think the main thing was just that there was a miscommunication about what their relationship was going to entail. And so if they just sat down and talked to each other, then most things would have been fixed, or at least everyone would understand each other and there would be less of like this guilt going around. But I've heard lots of people really loving this book, and so maybe it's just a me thing. But yeah, 1.5 stars. The 0.5 was added because the humor in this book was top notch. Like, I was like laughing my ass off. Oh, and the final book, you saw me take it down. The final book that I read in the month of June, final book y'all, is Crescent City by Sarah J Maas. I talked about this in my mid-year book freakout tag, so I won't spend a lot of time on it right now. But Sarah J Maas, there is good criticism surrounding her books, but her books are like a drug to me. And even though the first like 300 pages of this book I wasn't totally into, something just clicked with me and I was just like totally sold on this book. I just could barely put it down and I was crying, and it was a whole big show, and I cannot wait for the next one. Anyway, definitely 5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely loved this book, and my camera is about to die again. Alright, so that is all of the 36 books that I've read so far this year. If you made it to the end of this video, I'm sure this is a long video. Thank you so much for watching. Like, it warmed my heart. Thank you so much. I linked all of my social media down below. I haven't said this in a while because my Twitter, my Instagram, I wasn't really on. But now I am active on both of those platforms, so check them out if you are interested. And yeah, thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you later in another video. Bye!